Do you live in Negros, Cebu, or anywhere in the central Visayas? Do you have family in Kanlaon City, Toledo, Aloginsan, or Pinamungajan? Because if you do, you need to watch this entire video. Because what is happening on Kanlaon Volcano right now is not settling down, it is escalating, and the smoke coming out of that mountain has turned black. On the morning of July 9th, 2026, at 7:33 a, Monsieur Local time, Kanlaon Volcano on Negros Island let out a moderately explosive eruption that lasted just 3 minutes. 3 minutes does not sound like much, but in those 3 minutes, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, the agency everyone on Negros and Cebu relies on to know when to run, recorded a dark gray ash plume rising 2 to 3 kilometers straight up into the sky above the crater before drifting east. That is taller than most commercial jets fly on takeoff. And it did not just rise. It moved, carried by the wind, out over the island, out over the water, and into homes that thought they were far enough away to be safe. Here is the problem. This was not a clean eruption. Alongside the ash column, PHIVOLCS recorded what are called pyroclastic density currents, fast-moving avalanches of superheated gas, ash, and rock fragments that can travel down a volcano's slope at speeds that outrun a car. These were described as poorly visible, meaning they were partially hidden from view, and they were seen descending the southeastern slopes of the volcano, reaching possibly within 1 kilometer of the summit crater. 1 kilometer from a crater that just erupted is not a safe distance for anyone. It is why the 4-kilometer radius around Kanlaon is officially called the permanent danger zone, and it is why PHIVOLCS has repeated again and again that no one, under any circumstance, is allowed inside that radius. Think about what that means for the people who live around this mountain, families in La Castellana, in Kanlaon City, and the barangays that ring the base of Kanlaon went to sleep the night before, not knowing that within hours they would hear an explosion loud enough to send them running out of their homes. One resident of La Castellana described hearing a loud bang and immediately running outside to look at the mountain, saying that they wanted to leave but had nowhere to go. That is the reality for tens of thousands of people living near an active volcano in the Philippines. It is not an abstract risk on a map. It is a decision every single family near that danger zone has to live with, every single day, not knowing if today is the day the mountain goes further than 3 minutes. This next part matters, because the danger did not stay on Negros Island. The ash did not respect any coastline. It crossed the water and reached Cebu, one of the most densely populated islands in the entire Philippines. Ashfall was reported in Toledo City and in the municipalities of Aloginsan and Pinamungajan, all of which sit on the western coast of Cebu, facing Negros directly across the strait. Local governments across the province moved fast. Several units canceled classes on July 9th because of the ashfall, pulling children out of school buildings and keeping them home to avoid breathing in fine volcanic particles that can irritate lungs, eyes, and skin, especially in children and the elderly. The governor of Cebu directed the Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Office to actively monitor the ashfall situation across the province and placed the Provincial Health Office and every capital-run hospital on heightened alert, preparing for a surge in patients if the air quality situation worsens. Health officials urged people in the ashfall-affected zones to stay indoors as much as possible. When a provincial government puts its hospitals on alert because of a volcano on a neighboring island, that is not routine. That is a government bracing for the possibility that this event is not finished. And now it gets worse, because this eruption on July 9th did not happen in isolation. It is part of a pattern that has been building for months. Go back to the first quarter of 2026, and you will find that up to 50 barangays across 10 local government units near Kanlaon were already affected by ashfall following a separate, moderately explosive eruption that struck in the early evening of March 15th, 2026. That means this volcano has now produced at least 2 significant ashfall events in under 4 months. PHIVOLCS has kept Kanlaon at alert level 2 through all of it, which under the agency's scale means the volcano is exhibiting signs of unrest beyond background levels. Magma or hydrothermal activity is occurring beneath the surface, and further eruptive activity is possible. Alert level 2 is not the highest level PHIVOLCS can issue, but it is also not nothing. It is the level that keeps the 4-kilometer permanent danger zone firmly in place and keeps scientists watching this mountain around the clock. Here's why this is serious for anyone living in the region, and not just the immediate villages around the crater. Volcanic ash is not like the ash from a campfire or a burned piece of paper. It is made of pulverized rock and volcanic glass, sharp at a microscopic level, capable of scarring lung tissue when inhaled over time, capable of contaminating water supplies, capable of shorting out electrical equipment, and capable of collapsing roofs if it accumulates heavily enough during a larger eruption. It kills crops by coating leaves and blocking sunlight. It can force the closure of airports hundreds of kilometers away if a plume rises high enough to threaten aircraft engines, which is exactly why aviation warning centers track every single one of these plumes in real time, issuing advisories the moment ash is detected on satellite. Most people, watching a headline about a 3-minute eruption, assume that means the danger is over in 3 minutes. It does not work that way. The seismic and infrasound networks that PHIVOLCS uses to monitor Kanlaon are built specifically because the real risk with a volcano like this is not the single explosion you can time on a stopwatch. It is what is happening underground, in the magma chamber in the hours and days after that explosion, that determines whether the next event is smaller or significantly larger. This is where it becomes dangerous in a way that history has already shown the Philippines and shown the entire world more than once. To understand what a volcano in this region is capable of when conditions align, you have to look back to January 2020, when Taal Volcano, on the main island of Luzon, erupted with a violent phreatomagmatic explosion, the kind caused when rising magma meets water and flashes instantly into steam. Ash from Taal shot kilometers into the sky and drifted directly over Metro Manila, one of the most populated metropolitan areas on the planet. Flights were grounded, schools and government offices across the capital region shut down, and in the days that followed, authorities evacuated roughly hundreds of thousands of people from the surrounding towns and provinces, one of the largest volcanic evacuations in the country's modern history. People who thought they lived a comfortable distance from a lake volcano found themselves sleeping in gymnasiums and covered courts for weeks, uncertain when or if they would be allowed to return home. Taal is a reminder that a volcano does not need to be the biggest or most famous mountain in a country to upend the lives of an entire region within hours. Kanlaon is smaller than Taal in terms of population density around it, but the mechanism is the same: unrest, ashfall, evacuation zones, and a population forced to trust a monitoring agency's alert level with their lives. One more thing you need to know. Kanlaon has a long eruptive history, and it is not a volcano that goes quiet for generations at a time. It has produced repeated explosive and ashfall events over the past several decades, and PHIVOLCS treats every uptick in seismicity, every new plume, every change in gas emission as a piece of a larger puzzle about whether magma is moving closer to the surface. The agency does not raise or lower alert levels casually. Every signal, from ground deformation to sulfur dioxide output to the frequency of volcanic earthquakes, feeds into the decision of whether Alert Level 2 needs to become Alert Level 3, which would mean the danger zone itself could expand, and mandatory evacuation orders could follow for communities currently living just outside the 4-kilometer radius. But that is not the real story that most coverage of this event has focused on. The real story is the geography. Negros and Cebu sit close enough together that an eruption on one island can directly affect the other within hours, something that July 9th's event just proved in real time. That is a regional risk, not a local one. It means disaster planning cannot stop at the edge of the permanent danger zone on Negros. It has to extend across the strait, into provincial health systems, into school districts, into flight paths used by international carriers moving through the central Philippines. When a Cebu governor is placing hospitals on alert because of ash drifting off a neighboring island's volcano, that tells you disaster response planners already understand this is bigger than one mountain. Now the focus shifts to what happens next, because this is not a closed case. PHIVOLCS has not downgraded the alert level. The permanent danger zone has not been lifted or reduced. Entry remains strictly prohibited within 4 kilometers of the summit crater, and disaster officials on both Negros and Cebu are continuing to monitor the situation in real time, because nothing about the underlying unrest that produced this eruption has been resolved. The magma or hydrothermal system beneath Kanlaon that generated a 3-minute explosive eruption, a 2 to 3 kilometer ash column, and pyroclastic density currents reaching within a kilometer of the summit is still there, still active, and still capable of producing another event with little or no additional warning. Think about the families living inside and just outside that 4-kilometer boundary tonight. Farmers whose crops were coated in the ashfall from the March eruption and now face a second layer of ash just months later, watching their yields shrink while they wait to see if a third event is coming. Parents in Toledo and Alaguansan who kept their children home from school because of air quality, wondering if this becomes the new normal for this rainy season. Health workers in Cebu's provincial hospitals who were told to prepare for a surge in respiratory complaints, standing by without knowing whether they will see a trickle of patients or a flood. These are not statistics. These are people whose daily decisions, whether to send a child to school, whether to work the fields, whether to keep a bag packed by the door, are being shaped in real time by a volcano that officially, on paper, is still only at the second lowest alert level on a 4-level scale. Most people scrolling past a headline like this assume alert level 2 means low risk. But ask anyone who lived through Taal in January 2020, an eruption that also began without the highest possible alert level in place before conditions changed rapidly. Volcanic alert levels describe the current state of monitored unrest. They do not promise you the future. They can rise within hours if seismic swarms intensify, if gas emissions spike, if ground deformation accelerates. That is exactly why PHIVOLCS keeps instruments running continuously on Kanlaon day and night, and why the agency has not backed away from its warning that entry into the danger zone remains strictly prohibited, even after this latest event appeared on the surface, to last only 3 minutes. And tonight changes the timeline for anyone who was hoping this was a one-time event that has already passed. It is not one event. It is the second confirmed Ashfall producing eruption from Kanlaon in under 4 months, following the March 15th eruption that blanketed 50 barangays across 10 local government units. 2 major Ashfall events in 1 calendar year, both explosive, both sending plumes kilometers into the sky, both forcing school closures and health alerts across multiple provinces, is not the signature of a volcano settling down. It is the signature of a system that remains agitated, and agencies like PHIVOLCS are watching every single data point that comes in to determine whether the next signal points toward calm or toward something considerably larger. There's also the question of what happens if the next eruption does not last 3 minutes. Every volcanologist who studies systems like Kanlaon will tell you the same thing, that short, sharp, explosive bursts followed by a return to background unrest can sometimes represent a pressure release valve, small events preventing a larger buildup. But they can just as easily represent the opening stages of an escalating sequence, especially in volcanoes with a documented history of returning again and again over a period of years, which is exactly Kanlaon's pattern. The only way to know which scenario is unfolding is to watch the instruments in real time, which is precisely what is happening on Negros right now: seismographs, infrasound sensors, deformation monitors, and gas sensors, all feeding data to PHIVOLCS around the clock, with the permanent danger zone still fully in effect and no sign yet of a downgrade. If you have family on Negros or in Cebu's western coastal towns, the guidance from officials has not changed since July 9th. Stay out of the 4-kilometer permanent danger zone around Kanlaon's summit crater, no exceptions. If you are in an area affected by ashfall, stay indoors as much as possible. Keep windows closed and follow instructions from your local disaster risk reduction office. If your local government has announced school closures or health advisories because of ashfall, treat those as active, current guidance, not overcautious noise, because the same agencies that issued those advisories are the ones with direct access to the seismic and gas data coming off this volcano in real time. What happened on the morning of July 9th was fast. 3 minutes of explosive activity, a plume that rose higher than most buildings on Earth could ever reach, pyroclastic flows that came within a kilometer of the crater, and ash that crossed open water to reach a second, more populated island within hours. What happens next is the part nobody, not PHIVOLCS, not the provincial governments, not the residents themselves, can say with certainty yet. The alert level has not changed. The danger zone has not changed. The monitoring has not stopped. And for the families living in the shadow of Kanlaon tonight, on both sides of the strait that separates Negros from Cebu, the only certainty is that this volcano has already proven twice this year that it is not finished, and that the next signal from those instruments could point toward the situation calming down, or toward something that changes everything happening in this region right now. The next update from PHIVOLCS could come at any hour, and it could either ease the tension building across Negros and Cebu, or confirm that Kanlaon is moving toward a stronger phase. Either way, the mountain has already shown this year that it does not need much warning to send ash across an international flight corridor and over a heavily populated neighboring island. We will know more soon, but right now, for everyone living inside or near that 4-kilometer radius, this needs to be taken seriously, because the ground beneath Kanlaon is still moving, and nobody watching those instruments tonight is willing to say this is over.